A new report in the New York Times reveals that President Biden's aides, quote, leave him alone on weekends and shuffle his schedule around to avoid tiring out a, quote, aging president. The outlet, which published the article Sunday, spoke to a Democrat under conditions of anonymity who divulged that the president's age has been a topic of conversation, detailing that at a closed dinner earlier this year. Former Democratic senators and governors, quote, agreed he was too old to run again. Local leaders often call the White House to inquire about his health.
The report comes just days after Biden took a tumble on stage following his commencement address at the Air Force Academy. The New York Times is getting dragged on Twitter for appearing to call into question President Biden's age and fitness to run the country. Many on the social media platform blasted the outlet, calling its report embarrassing, slobbering, and not objective. It's interesting to me because as I read the article, I thought it went out of its way to be very fair to Joe Biden. It included many quotes from people that said, to the extent that he rambles, he's always rambled. To the extent that he's told factually unfactual stories, that's always been the case. He's always been gaffe prone. To the extent that he seems to be stiff and shuffling, it's not because of any neurological disorder, but because of wear and tear that comes with age. All of those were quotes embedded in this article. Moreover, in the second half, they tried to They do turn the focus onto Donald Trump, Donald Trump's age being not that much younger than Joe Biden. The fact that Donald Trump, quote, tipped the scales at 244 pounds and did not exercise. His diet leaned heavily on cheeseburgers and steak. I mean, this is also in the very article that they're saying is somehow protective of, too hard on Joe Biden.
Which is always a silly thing to go after. Like, Trump has been described as an unhealthy man in terms of his weight and his exercise and his eating, but we're really talking about Joe Biden's mental fitness. And you can dislike Trump all you want, but he sounds the same. He's expressing the same ideas. He responds on the fly to questions. You might not like the answers you get from him if you're a liberal Democrat. You certainly don't. But it's not the same kind of, is he aware of what's going on or his surroundings or those questions that people have about Joe Biden. It's really questions of different magnitude. And I separate that from, again, the fall. Anyone can fall. I agree. Sure. And you can be physically frail and elderly, but still totally mentally with it. Obviously, the job of presidency requires some amount of physical fitness because you got to fly around all over the place. Mm-hmm. It's a kind of grueling schedule. Honestly, I can't imagine subjecting people in their 80s to it. To be honest, when I travel, I'm exhausted. I'm worn out for just like a fraction of the amount of work-related, getting up early and staying up late and following the news and talking to people. It tires me out, and in my 80s, I can't imagine doing it. So that is an issue. But the main thing is does he understand, he's slow to react, but are all the gears turning properly?
Yeah, and in his defense, it's a mixed bag. And the article points this out up top, that at the same time that he was complimented for his quickness and, mental faculties while negotiating the debt ceiling crisis, by Republicans. He got compliments and plaudits for that. Later that day, he tripped and fell. Okay. They, in the article, discussed the stamina that he had on that secret train trip to Ukraine, a couple of weeks ago. And that was an all-night, overnight trip.
Right.
It juxtaposed him taking middle-of-the-night calls to deal with the war in Ukraine at the same time that he fumbled the next day in a press conference to remember all of his grandchildren's names. I mean, there's something that's kind of normal and relatable about that. And it is true, as this article points out, that Donald Trump is only 4 years younger and was the oldest president in history until Joe Biden was elected. And if Donald Trump were to win next year, he would be 82 at the end of his term, which is older than Biden will be at the end of this term.
And Trump doesn't he's smart about this. He knows he doesn't want to make it a question of age too much. So he did a town hall with Sean Hannity recently, where he actually went after Sean Hannity a little bit in the town hall. He said, you're too mean to Biden about his age. He said, you got to be respectful. He kind of, he chided Hannity a little bit for really laying into Biden over his age. That's because Trump doesn't really want it to be a question of age, because Trump is old as well. And if age is the issue this all hinges on, that's an argument not for Donald Trump, but for Ron DeSantis or someone else.
Right.
So he doesn't really want to make it about age.
No, I get that. Look, as someone who used to work for Bernie Sanders, I certainly understand that argument. And it was frustrating at the time because the age gap between Bernie and Biden and Elizabeth Warren were all just a handful of years, but the media very much tried to make a case out of Bernie Sanders, obviously also having had the heart attack, but that his age in particular was disqualifying when there was a lot of reasons for us to want to switch the conversation to being about one's mental stamina, which has been thrown into question for Joe Biden. Remember, there was a poll a month or so ago that showed that the majority of voters think that Joe Biden is too old to serve. I think it was 68% of voters felt that way, including a large number of Democratic voters. This isn't necessarily just a partisan issue, which is why to so many folks, it is frustrating not to allow there to be some kind of Democratic primary.
Well, and I talk about this all the time. Even in terms of Congress, in terms of our legislators, the average age has gotten up and up and up and up. And I respect the elderly and our grandparents and great-grandparents generation, absolutely. But I would not want them, answering or making very detailed, specific policy and legislative choices with respect to tech and many other issue areas where I struggle to imagine them being really in touch with it. That's a huge problem. Our system seems to, whatever its strengths, a significant flaw of the system we have that's not the parliamentary system, a primary system, everything we have going on, allows people, even at a very advanced age now, to just stay in Congress forever, stay in government forever. And I don't think it serves the policy, I don't think it serves the interests of the American people, but not from a right-left perspective at all, just from a, is this good government best practices to have people of this age in the private sector? When you're losing it, sometimes, the board puts pressure on you to get out of there, right? We don't have that equivalent. As long as you're popular with your district or your voters. Yeah. Look, we don't throw people out. We don't term limit people in the legislative side of things.
Right. And it's notable as well that the anti-establishment isn't also falling along age lines either. It's not the case that the younger candidate is the more, obviously look at Bernie, look at RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson, who I think are about 6 months apart, 69, 70 years old. It is a little weird.
70?
Doesn't she look good?
She does look good.
she looks great, but that's another big part of this piece, is that there's a perception of age that's going along with people's actual fitness and things like that. Bernie was very active. He was a runner. He's famously running up and down the halls of Congress and up and down the escalators, but he presents as an older guy. He doesn't quaff himself in the way that Joe Biden does, or care about the fit of his suits, or present himself as anything other than somebody's kind of curmudgeonly grandpa. So all of these things are going into the mix, but I do think your central point that there needs to be more engagement with the cognitive concerns. You have local leaders, according to this New York Times report, calling the White House to check up on Biden's ability to do his job. I think it's not unreasonable for that to be a concern to many Americans.
Right. I know there are people, or at least liberals, who've wanted to have mandatory retirement age for court justices, Supreme Court justices. I understand that sentiment. It's like our legislators, you got to have term limits or something would be the way to do it instead of an actual age cutoff, but it is an issue.
Yeah.
More Rising right after this.